Alright, today I'm going to show you how to add 2.5 inches to the throttle arms of the Thrustmaster Warthog. The picture you see here will be the end result. This is an actual throttle from an A10. Notice the height difference in the offset. Why does this matter? Well, do you have issues refueling? And the extension adds leverage, which gives you a longer pull, which in turn allows you to give the throttle a lot more sensitive inputs, making it able to find that sweet spot just a lot easier. This is your stock model. Notice how much shorter the throttle arms are. So I developed a way to try to keep this as relatively painless as possible. Also, do not use a drill on the screws. The heat from moving too fast will just cause a lot of problems with things melting together. So use a hand screwdriver for everything with this. It's just better that way. Okay, for this you will need a container for small screws and parts, both main size Phillips screwdrivers, a 1/16 inch drill bit, an X-Acto knife of some kind, and a set of gripping tweezers. A drill like this one, which is lightweight, works well because it's got a nice slow speed and therefore would drill the hole and not melt the plastic. First, start by taking the throttle, put it on its side, remove all the countersunk screws in the bottom plates. There's a couple of these bottom plates. There's the outer one, the inner one, which the inner one will just pop off. They're both kind of sandwiched together. Just put those aside. Next, we need to remove the bottom stop. This actually contains a spring inside of it, which is what allows you to do the pull up and idle to cut off. Remove the screws, and there's a little guide piece there. Save that in your little dish with your screws. You will need part of these screws later. I'm supplying the other screw that goes in the other side. Just a little bit of a different design for fluidity. Okay, once you have those out, the part will slide all the way out. So before that happens, there's a little guide on the front of that. Now you may need to use an Allen wrench on this part. Mine were just hand loosened, so I was able to pop mine right off. So remove that, and then you will be able to remove your throttle arms. And when you do this, you only have so much wire inside there. So notice how I put the throttle forward before I slide it off to not put too much pressure on that wire. You want to keep a very mindful eye of these wires during this entire process, not to pinch them or crimp them. The good news is the wire length that's already in your throttle already is the right length, even with these extensions, so there is no additions or soldering or anything like that. It's pretty straightforward. So you remove the outer screws on the extension cap section, and it just simply exposes a track for the slot for the throttle part and a slot for the wire. Now on this throttle, these wires do not have a plug, so it's probably best just to leave those in. The little small parts I just pulled out are very important too. Make sure you don't lose those. Those are your screw guides. And then do the same thing with the other side. If you notice, mine looks a little bit different because I've already done this in order to figure out exact sizes and whatnot. There's the wire I was talking about. And in order to just pop that out, you just take your tweezers and just kind of loosen it a little bit, and then it'll just pluck right out. And then there you go. And then set that aside. Now this is the dimension for your left throttle of your cutting points. 1 inch for the cap and 1.5 inches down for the actual stalk. And then this is the dimension for your right throttle. 1 1/8 of an inch down on the main stalk and 5/8 of an inch down from the cap stalk. Now, it doesn't matter how you cut it. I chose to use a hacksaw. I have a full shop of everything. I'm just showing you that it can be done simply with a hacksaw. I put a clamp on the side, obviously, that I no longer intend to use for it. But as long as you can cut a straight cut with anything, if you want to use a Dremel, you can do that. Just do it on a slow speed, otherwise it melts the plastic, and then you have more to cut off in the end with a razor. So this is just a simple straight cut. Now, I happen to have a sanding wheel and stuff like that, so I can put it to that to just make it a little bit smoother. But it's up to you however you want to cut it. And then after you cut it, these are the edges that you want to trim down just for a little bit of a nicer look. Now I know it's hard to see here, but these measurements are 1/8 of an inch and 1/2 inch is where these marks should be. And then you were going to use the 1/16 inch drill bit to drill a hole straight through those, as straight as you can. And if you need to deburr them, just stick your razor knife down in there and just give it a little twist. So pull that little twisty out there. Next, take the left arm extension and just line it up there. Take something and mark a little circle. You're going to drill a little hole for a 1/16 inch screw to go in there for support. And on the back as well for the little post that runs up through the center of that. And then just go ahead and drill those out with the same drill bit. And after everything's drilled, make sure you have a nice clean hole. At this point, go ahead and unscrew all the screws out of the new extensions. The dimensions for the throttle on the left are 1/8 and 1/2 of an inch. So I take a screw and just go ahead and pre-screw it in. This just kind of threads the hole, the type of plastic that it is. It works a lot smoother when you're trying to hold a bunch of things, putting it together, and you already have a threaded hole. And then slide those parts together. You want this part to go in pretty snug. When you're screwing them in, just screw them in just to the point of tight, not too tight. and then you see the length of wire that you do get, and then I have it aimed forward at full throttle for this part. It helps with the wire tension. And then we are going to flip it on its side because we want to guide this wire into this little track right here. That just helps it from pinching, and also that's the track it goes up when you put the outer shell on it. Re-guide the wire back into the track. It's pretty easy. It goes pretty smooth. It naturally wants to fit in there like it already was in the first place. Then go ahead and put your screws back in. This, you have to move the throttle back and forth to get to the screws, and it is kind of an odd angle, but they're tiny screws, so they don't really give you a lot of trouble. And then take your end, make sure you have your parts. These are your screw guides. Make sure you put them back in. There's small ones and long ones. The long ones obviously are for the larger throttle, and the small ones aren't. Don't mix them up because you can only screw it up one way. Ordinarily, they fit just fine. Take your cap. I may make sure that there's no weird wire pinches in there or anything like that, and where the wire track guide is. And there's small screws and long screws. Same principle applies. Small screws for the small handle. These take the larger of the Phillips. Now you're done with that side for now. These are the measurements: 1/2 inch from the very edge of the large throttle and 1 inch down for the second hole. That is for the center peg. Same principle with this. We're going to do it. We're going to drill them out. I found it easier to use clamps in some situations, but we drill them out, thread the hole again, and then put it together, and then it fits just like that right in there. This one is a little more tricky with the wire, however. Getting the wire in there is a little more tricky. Now you're going to pre-put these together in order to get the holes right for where the two connect. These screws just help with the stability of the structure, because as you make them longer, they do tend to get a little wobbly just out of nature. So I mark the holes, and then I drill them at the angle that is about right for it, which is about 45 degrees. And once you've got that hole drilled, go ahead and put the screw in it, and it can be slided down onto its peg. And that may take a little finagling here and there to get it to seat all the way down. It's important it seats all the way down for the spring action to still work for underneath it. And then once again, go up underneath and do the same thing with the wire. Make sure that wire gets fed into its proper track, as seen there, for the same reason, so they don't get pinched. And guide that wire right back up the same. and then go ahead and plug that plug in. If you have large hands, you may definitely want to use the tweezers for some of these parts, or a pair of needle nose could work. Just don't damage the wires as you're trying to do it. Make sure you have it going the correct way too. There's only one way that fits in. This wire only has about an inch to spare. So at the bottom of the right stalk, it is actually cut up a little higher so that the wire has just a little bit more slack, so it's not pulled taut. At this point, you can go ahead and put the screws into the outer shell to make the entire outer shell one piece again. And then don't forget your screw guides. In and snug, and make sure it's not going to pinch anywhere. And put your longer screws in this side. I start with the top first. It makes it easier. The bottom ones are a little bit more of a pain due to the lack of room you have, so I put one in to hold it there in place while I start with the smaller ones. The smaller ones do take the smaller screwdriver on this one as well, on this side. You may need to re-drill very lightly a pilot if you have a plastic obstruction or something. I just drilled right through mine. This is for an example purpose only anyway, really. And then go ahead and add the screws. It makes it a little more stable. Now this is a little wobblier than it was previously. It's not much. It's still very sturdy, especially when they're locked together once you get them. Now there's no springs in them yet down there. That's why they're still loose from that. But the added height actually helps with the smoothness feeling as well. It feels very, it glides. It just has a whole different feel to it. And now we are going to go ahead and put the springs and the pieces. If you see, the black screws are the ones that I supply. You'll see that they go into the smaller of the two pegs, not on this part, but on the actual stock. When you get yours apart, you'll be able to see. I'm sorry, I forgot to take a close-up of that part. But use the screw that it came with on the larger side. Now I will have pre-tapped these holes as well, so you don't have to worry about tapping any of the holes. Everything will come assembled together for you as far as the extra parts, and I will have those bored out, or tapped out rather. Just be easy on the tension, not to over torque. Then this is what you should see. Then go ahead and reassemble your plates, making sure that you get your ground wire in the two sides that actually have a ground wire loop. And here's your finished product. And you will notice a huge difference. It literally, for me, it made refueling like 40% easier anyway. This idea, by the way, was brought to me by a friend of mine named Scott, and he wanted this to happen, so I helped him make it happen. And I will put a link in the bottom to an email in order for anyone else that would like to order this to get a hold of it. Thank you.